Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody.
We're not in a day where we need a moment. We're in a day where we have to build a movement that intersects and brings us all together. We don't know yet what would happen if we had in 30 to 40 states a moral poor people's campaign with people in state capitals over an extended period of time. But I think we ought to find out.
Because everybody's got a right to live.
We have a couple more sections left. We've divided this teach-in around some of the core issues of this Poor People's Campaign. I think we said this before, but when Dr. King launched the Poor People's Campaign in '67 and '68, he was talking about the tripartite evils of racism, economic exploitation, poverty, and militarism. Today, if we don't talk about ecological devastation, we get nowhere. And also, it's so important in this time, in this country, to talk about this question of voting rights. And so this is why we've kind of organized the day as we have. We are gonna have now a look at militarism and the cost of war. And so I wanna introduce both Jodie Evans, who is the co-founder of CODEPINK, Women for Peace. Yay, Jodie. And also we have Jonathan Huto, who is a national member of Veterans for Peace and the coordinator of Prince George's County People's Coalition. He's the author of a book, Anti-War Soldier, and it's really a great honor to have both of these amazing leaders with us today.
Good afternoon. I'm so privileged to be here with you and so thankful that Reverend Barber invited me. I spend my life, the blessing of my life, to try to end war and militarism. There are so many powerful and courageous voices who have spoken up about militarism at the risk of personal freedom and life that I offer these words in reverence to. In these halls, we have the spirit of Frederick Douglass and his fellow abolitionists, John Brown and Harriet Tubman, who deeply and morally understood the violence of the oppressor and the immorality of the oppressor cannot be met with silence. And we gather here to find the power of our voices as we enter a new year. Reverend Jerry Wright and Reverend King were moral voices that recognized that militarism was the root cause of the civil rights struggle. Militarism is at the root of the American experience. It is as American as apple pie. Genocide and slavery are the first expressions of militarism. The slave trade made it international from the very beginning. This ugliness they tried to hide with nationalism, with the civilizing of Africans, with the suppression and exiling of the indigenous community. A common event in America is to hide the ugliness of the reality with cultural covers, with lies and stories created to seduce some of us out of seeing. Stories that give us false choices and pit us against each other. Stories that confuse to keep us from seeing the immorality and insanity at the core of the structures we live at the mercy of. My moment of awakening came when Aquila Shirelles, who had negotiated the peace treaty between the Crips and the Bloods the night before the Rodney King verdict in 1992, invited me to a gathering in Watts. What I witnessed in this gathering was that all the young men whose lives were locked in the chains of poverty and racism were each sons of men who had been fodder in the war in Vietnam. That war had visibly come home to this community in Watts. 20,000 lives had been lost in 20 years that no one spoke about. This is more lives than were lost in the conflicts in Ireland and Palestine. This story was suppressed, but it was a profound expression of the three pillars that Reverend King spoke about: militarism, racism, and poverty. Of course, almost everyone in that community that day knew already what I was discovering. It was what compelled me to fly across the country when I learned that Bush was requesting Congress fund a preemptive strike on the innocent people of Iraq. I had witnessed the preemptive strike against innocent people of color in my own community. It was that and the powerful words of Congresswoman Barbara Lee, that lone voice that stood up against the illegal, immoral attack on Afghanistan. She said that she spoke from her moral compass, her conscience, and her God, as she said, military action will not prevent international acts of terrorism. I urge the use of restraint. Step back for a moment and think through the implications of our actions today. As we act, let us not become the evil we deplore. In Reverend King's powerful speech almost 50 years ago, he cited 7 independent reasons to end US militarism and imperialism as not merely a moral imperative, but a prerequisite to achieving the meaningful reforms he was working for in American domestic life. Before I remember those for you, I want you to listen, knowing the power of them. He was attacked the next day by the New York Times and by 179 other newspapers. His popularity plummeted. That reflects the dangerousness of those truths he spoke that a year later got him killed. He exposed the violence at the core of the United States of America. This is not allowed. Poor people at the immediate effect of this violence know this all too well. To speak truth is a courageous act. I just listened to his speech and pulled out the 7 points, but I encourage all of you to go home and listen or read that speech before starting 2017. 1, so I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and to attack it as such. 2, war was sending the sons, brothers, husbands of the poor to fight and to die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. That the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence. That war poisons our soul. That the good news was meant for all people. Can I threaten them with death, or must I not share with them my life? And that nationalism divides, and we are all connected, for no document from human hands can make these lives any less our brother. In rereading it, I also noted that he spoke about how it affected the planet, that militarism is also a devastation to the planet. During our work to end war and militarism at CODEPINK, we have traveled to Afghanistan, Iraq, Gaza, Yemen. It was as I was watching the immoral bombing of the people in Gaza that focused violence against the poorest of the poor, that those weapons were then turned on a community of people grieving the loss of a brother shot down in cold blood in the middle of the street in Ferguson. And a few months ago, it was tanks aimed at us as we stood against a mining company in Standing Rock. We live inside a war economy that war serves. The weapons of war are in our streets. They are part of our culture. It has been normalized by the stories told us by mainstream media that serves the ruling class. There are now $1.3 billion worth of weapons that have been delivered to the cities of the United States. I'm going to leave it to my brother Jonathan to talk about the costs of war. But why do we tolerate these? They're innumerable, they're unconscionable, they're immoral. So some points to help you. Don't believe the lies and help unpack them for others. Don't agree to false choices. Expose them for your community. It is a lie when someone separates us. We are all connected. We are brothers and sisters. No life is more valuable than another. Don't believe we are bringing safety and security to the world. War, weapons, the ripping of the fabric of humanity doesn't bring safety and security. It brings more violence, more weapons, more greed, more hatred, more racism, more poverty, more insanity, more lies, on and on. We are called to create conditions conducive to life. When this is not happening, it is our job to speak out and courageously model what that looks like. There is a peace economy. It is the giving, sharing, caring, thriving, relational, resilient economy without which none of us would be alive. It is not the war economy that argues that it keeps us safe and secure and gives us life. Divest yourselves from that war economy. When you find something destructive, oppressive, and extractive that thrives on separation, alienation, and scarcity, walk away, hug someone. Love is abundant. Reverend Barber called on me, and I heeded his call. History teaches us that only a fusion movement has any success. We can expect the status quo and the elite to respond with contempt and hostility, but love, peace, and morality represent our best and last hope. It is that that will turn the pyramid upside down, all of us together, not separated. At CODEPINK, we start 2017 to rise, love, and resist. Because we want to, and as Reverend Barber said, because we have to, because we must do it all together. Thank you.
All right. So thank you. Thank you to Reverend Barber. Thank you to Repairers of the Breach for inviting us to share with you today on the cost of war and on militarism and the damage and destruction it's doing to our society. I don't come to you today as a pundit or an intellectual. I don't even come as an educator, although I do believe in education. I come as an organizer. So I'm not looking at a room of people that need to know the stats and the figures and what's actually taking place. If you're in this room today, there's something inside of you that told you, either from experience, either it's a calling that you have a moral responsibility. All right, so this is not an education I'm gonna give you. It's more of some tools and some aspects that we can use in order to become better, more effective organizers on the ground, in order to stop this machine of death that is sucking the blood out of our national economy, putting it into a war economy, no money for jobs, no money for health care, no money for schools. You all with me? Yeah. So on February 17th, 1998, I was a junior political science major at Howard University. You know? And that was the year. Got some bison in the house. You a bison? Come on. If you're a bison, give it up. Bison over here. And I always represent my Howard University. And that year I was humbled and honored to serve as the student body president at Howard University, Houston president. And we were the last student government to bring on that campus 9 months before he passed, the late Kwame Ture, known to my mother's generation as Stokely Carmichael. He left us with some dictums that day that burned my brain and bathed my veins. Haven't been the same since. When he talked about struggle, he said to us, he said, some of us don't understand the real essence of our struggle. He said that the struggle is eternal. He said that is, there's no time for us to just go relax and enjoy life. He even told us if we thought that way, that was reactionary thinking of the worst order. But on the principle of organization, he said that there's no such thing as an inferior people. He went further to say there is a such thing as oppressed people. He said, and they're not oppressed by superior people. They're oppressed by people who are better organized than they are. And then he went further to say, he says, so if you want to know why the Ku Klux Klan historically has terrorized communities of color, he says, because they are organized. He said they have meetings every week. He then said that members go to the meetings every week. They study racist ideology, they internalize it, they ingrain it, and then they establish programs for it. And he would challenge us to say, how many of us go to meetings every week for the people? How many of us are studying the people's ideology? Do we even have people's uniforms and things like that, right? So I want to say to you in terms of combating militarism, we've got to build with those organizations that are on the ground that are doing this work. And if you don't know who and what those organizations are, let's put some of those organizations out there. Veterans for Peace, of which I'm a national member. This is a national organization, Veterans for Peace, fighting on the ground. You don't have to be a veteran to even be a member. They have associate members of Veterans for Peace. Go to their website, vfp.org, get you a membership. Let's find an organization on the ground that you can link up to at this moment right now. Iraq Veterans Against the War is another organization that's working against militarism. The GI Rights Project, okay, the GI Rights Hotline needs volunteers to actually provide the counseling that military members use in order to fight not only against war, because if you're against all forms of war, you can file for conscience objection, but to also fight against those basic grievances that enlisted members of the military have. I'm gonna give you an anecdote. When I was 17 years old, I came from a home where my mother opposed militarism. We weren't a rich family. We didn't have a lot of money. I was one of those families, we didn't grow up necessarily poor. We had the necessities of life, but we didn't have everything. But we were rich in values, right? So my mother definitely kept military recruiters away from me at age 17, 18. But at age 26, with an undergraduate degree, with a small son and needing to pay off student loans and wanting to start a graduate education, I thought the Navy could be an actual outlet for me. So I joined the United States Navy in January 2004, and 2 years later was off the coast of Iraq and had a hangman's noose dangling in front of my face, all right? So I took my chain of command to task, but then I got this book in the mail, Soldiers in Revolt, all right? Which chronicles GI resistance during the Vietnam War. So while we also got to fight in order to keep as many of our young people, in order for them to understand the choices that they have, whether that's vocational, trade, community college, what have you, because of the economic compulsion of the actual military, and also because of the Vietnam syndrome, which led to us moving from a draft to a totally volunteer-based military, unfortunately, many of our young people are going to join regardless. The actual, some of the speakers have said it earlier in terms of these places throughout America, the Birmingham, Alabamas, the Steubenville, Ohio's, the Pittsburgh, PAs, the Chattanooga, Tennessee's, where you can see these places, U.S. Steel Pipe and other places, where my uncle worked for 40 years at U.S. Steel. That place is padlocked today. The military recruitment office isn't padlocked. Millions of dollars are channeled into that, but we can organize our people within the military. Yes, we can. The Military Whistleblower Protection Act gives military members the right to send a protected communication to a member of Congress on any issue, And it was the basis of that which led to the Appeal for Redress, which we launched when I was active duty Navy. The Appeal for Redress, and it's chronicled in this book that we put out called Anti-War Soldier, How to Dissent Within the Ranks of the Military. So what does that mean for the folks here, for folks who are listening? All of us live somewhere near a military base. You come in contact with active duty members out there in the community. So I would urge you to arm yourself with the information, for lack of a better term, arm yourself, empower yourself with the information. Go to organizations like the Center for Conscience and War, GI Rights Hotline. There's an organization that works to give our young people the choices, or to empower them with the choices they need. That's the National Network Opposing the Militarization of Our Youth. Choices, the late John Judge was one of the founders of this organization. Get with these organizations. Get the information. Let's get in front of these young people. Just as the military recruiters and the ROTCs are getting in front of our young people, we have to get in front of our young people. And lastly, I'm going to end by saying that the fusion movement, I live in a county, Prince George's County, Maryland. Come on. Roughly about 70% African American almost. This is a county that voted for Hillary Clinton in the primaries 89%. This is a county that voted for Hillary Clinton in the general election 92%. Trump got 8% of the vote in Prince George's County. I wonder where they live. But come on, y'all can clap to that. But I'm going to end by saying that we've got to struggle against those who claim to be our allies. I live in a county, majority Democratic Party county, where right now they closing schools, closing school right in my neighborhood. Got 29 schools on the list they're gonna close to supposedly save $600+ million. That's Prince George's County. Prince George's County, half of the school board appointed, chairperson appointed, superintendent appointed. We're struggling for democracy in Prince George's County. Prince George's County, where in the election cycle in 2010, 80+ thousand black voters stayed home, Governor Hogan gets elected. Governor Hogan announces no Syrian refugees welcome to the state of Maryland. Prince George's County, state of Maryland, the massive Democratic county. Democratic state. So we've got to struggle even with those who claim to be our allies. So I thank you, Repairers of the Breach. We're gonna lock arms, right? We already locked. And we're gonna continue to organize, organize, organize. Thank you very much.
Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down in jail. Because everybody's got a right to live.